The radiant visions you spoke of are the very same my people had before our world was consumed by the Void Lord Dimensius.
Oh no!
Do you think that's what's happening here on Azeroth?
It is what turned me into the monstrosity you see before you now.
Oh!
Only you can stop the same fate befalling this world.
Sure thing, Locust Walker. We're gonna stop it.
Although, sorry, just to be clear, you're saying that if we didn't stop it, we'd all turn into cool ethereals like you?
Ooh.
It is a terrifying fate.
Yeah, totally.
Totally, yeah.
And we will stop it for sure, but what I'm saying is, hypothetically, if we didn't...
Like if we failed.
Or if we just slept in or something, we'd turn into ethereals like you, right?
Right?
Well, yes, but you have to stop it.
Okay, good to know.
You are going to stop it, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, sure, totally. I mean, if we can.
Yeah, it sounds pretty difficult though, to be honest. Like, I don't know if we'll really be able to.
But we'll totally try.
We will try our best, yeah.
Do you promise me that you'll stop it?
We promise to try. Anyway, see you later.
Maybe be you later.
If we fail to unfortunately stop the void threat.
What colour bandages are you going to have, Evie?
Probably purple. Do you think Xal'atath would like purple?
I think she would.
Knowledge is power.
Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and welcome to another episode of the Weekly Reset, Taliesin and Evitel's wondrous wisdom show, in a week of absolute grade A, bona fide, 9-carat, top-drawer lore bombs that we are going to indulge in. Because, first of all, there was patch 10.2.7, Dark Heart, where we followed Alleria on her pursuit of the Harbinger, who it turns out was Xal'atath. I know, Xal'atath. I was also very shocked. And in that questline, lore bomb for the whole story and purpose of the War Within. Then there were the Troll and Draenei Heritage Armor questlines, which, yeah, lore bomb there too for, honestly, I think the Midnight expansion. Likewise, the Whispers of Warning short story, where Alleria goes to visit her son, Arator, and try to convince him not to fight in the war she believes is coming, with, I don't know, at least 2 lore bombs in there for sure, and all that before we even mention the War Within Alpha, which this week took in Azj-Kahet, the final leveling zone and location of the first raid, which has, its lore bomb city in there. You better believe we will be delving deep into that zone and its dungeons, and the fact that it gives us our first endgame bits and bobs. Basically, there is a lot to talk about, and let us begin with patch 10.2.7, which we talked about a lot during this week's podcast. Hey, do you know our podcast? It's called A WoW Podcast. Obviously, me and Evie chat about WoW. There's a playlist for it on this very channel, and you can also find it on your podcast listening apps too. Anyway, this was Xal'atath's reintroduction back into the mainline story. It had Alleria being moody and voidy and troubled, and ending the quest line much less assured and confident than she started it. It had Khadgar being Khadgar, but slightly more Tom Holland looking. It features the Void Elves really getting the spotlight for the first time, like ever, and honestly, a fair few people getting the chance to see their starting zone for the first time ever too. And of course, a huge lore bomb regarding the Radiant Song, the visions that Thrall, Anduin, Jaina, and others have been getting from, presumably, the World Soul. Locust Eater can absolutely get it. He was always kind of cool, but in these cutscenes, he is super cool, and I've got a feeling that now Xal'atath is on the scene as the void entity you can't trust. He is being subtly repositioned as the more trustworthy and loyal void entity you can't trust. Like, I've got the feeling he's going to be on hand to explain what Xal'atath is up to in terms of the void, and he starts informing us that the Radiant Song was also heard by his people on his homeworld, Carriage, before Dimensius the Devourer, the Void Lord, appeared and turned up to eat it. We don't know loads about the exact details of Dimensius and the Ethereals, but the most accepted version of events is that he turned up, attacked the planet with a bunch of void and arcane energy, we'll come back to that, and the people of Carriage scrambled to build defenses against the void bombardment, but therefore couldn't also manage to defend against against the arcane attack, and it was that wiped out their physical forms and turned them into the beings of pure arcane energy we see today. Some have since turned to the shadow and become all voidy like Locust Eater, and double lore bomb because the world soul of Carriage, triple lore bomb because Carriage apparently has a world soul. Nice one. But also the Radiant Song being something that the Ethereals heard before a Void Lord attack it's big, isn't it? Is Azeroth's Radiant Song specifically warning of a Void Lord on the way, or is it a standard cry of help generally because she's just in dire trouble? I think the former is more exciting, but either way, this is obviously something we should be very worried about. Will we go to Carriage at some point in the World Soul Saga? I certainly wouldn't bet against it, and I certainly wouldn't be against it, but we don't have time to dawdle here. Next, the Whispers of Warning short story, another thing we talked through in the podcast, so let's just stick to the lore bombs here. Arator has 2 tattoos, a dark shadowy dragon on one arm and a light dragon on the other. He is the child of light and shadow, just like I said 6 years ago. He is obviously going to be very important in the inevitable clash between Turalyon and Alleria in the next expansion or two. And lore bomb number 2, I love the focus on the rebuilding of Silvermoon in this story. It feels like every other line, it really wants to express to you just how much work is going into getting this city ready for the Midnight expansion revamp. Which, if Turalyon and actually Arator and of course Alleria walking around the place with various amounts of freedom as anything to go by, will be at least partially faction neutral. Which makes sense, right? I mean, it's a hub city after all. Pretty much all we know of Midnight so far is that we will be defending the Sunwell against a huge void attack. Surely Silvermoon will be the natural hub city for that. Or maybe not? Because lore bomb in the Draenei Heritage Armor Quest line this week, the Draenei are building a new capital city for themselves, and the very strong implication is that it will be in Bloodmist or the Azure Isle. And you know, I'm a simple man. I appreciate symmetry and very easy to read symbolism, and there would certainly be a circular neatness, wouldn't there, about a revamped Bloodmist Isle in the same expansion as the revamped Silvermoon, wouldn't there? The 2 Burning Crusade races, finally, after 20 years, rebuilding their homes and finally being able to fly in those homes. It would feel great and fitting, and if it were to happen, well, maybe the Alliance wouldn't need to use Silvermoon as their Midnight hub city because they could use the new Draenei gaff. I think they'll probably still use Silvermoon, to be honest, but who knows? Let's move on to the War Within Alpha, the Nerubian city of Azj-Kahet, and the testing we've been able to do on that, because we have now seen and explored every single War Within leveling zone. We have now tested every single launch dungeon. We have even had a dabble in some of the initial level 80 endgame. We have the clearest picture yet of what this new expansion is going to be like. And the question is, will it be good? Oh man, I hope so. I mean, just please, let it be good. This zone has players fighting for survival in the Nerubian stronghold, making allies and infiltrating their huge city, which make 3 out of the 4 War Within leveling zones that have genuine expansion hub-sized cities in them. And you know how much I love me a living, breathing city in WoW. If I was to sum up my entire playthrough experience vibe in this zone, I'd probably say, imagine Maldraxxus, but in Zaralek Caverns, and it wants to be Suramar. Zaralek because, well, like the Ringing Deeps, it's underground, and it's a bit like Zaralek. Oh, and also, there's an entire Niffin town in this zone too, and actually, this bit of the zone is really cool. It's full of goblins from the Venture Company, and their leader is from the Undermine, and talks about the Undermine. She said the thing. But honestly, I'm still not 100% sure that if I was making an underground zone 2 major patches after Zaralek Caverns, and I was really keen to not make people compare it to Zaralek Caverns, I would probably think twice about putting the Niffin in there is all, because they make me instantly think of Zaralek. But okay, there is a huge Maldraxxus feel in here too, partly because the Nerubian architecture, isn't a million miles away from the Maldraxxus house style, partly because of the plots that focus on the military and opposing factions who all have different roles in Nerubian society, and partly because, and this one's a bit weird, but I hope you get it, there's more than a couple of bits where there's like a mad scientist Nerubian just chilling out by an ooze lake next to a table of potions. It's random, but it's like, oh yeah, like Maldraxxus. And it's definitely worth mentioning Suramar here too, because that is clearly a big influence as well. The story of the zone, Bluebot Spoiler, is that this Nerubian kingdom had kind of departed from their old god-worshipping ways under their last monarch, who was recently deposed by the new queen, Ansarek, the final boss of the first raid. She is clearly being backed by Xal'atath, and together they are creating ascended Nerubians, those sleek, voidy humanoid models you may have seen, to rule over the city with an iron fist. We befriend the Weaver, who is like a secret oracle resistance leader, and over the course of the questing, we make connections with two other disgruntled Nerubian higher-ups who join our cause. This being a big bug city, obviously it doesn't feel anywhere near as recognizable or alive as Suramar. And how could it, you know? The Nightfallen were graceful humanoid elves. This is literally a bunch of spiders. And it's kind of an impossible task to give them a city, isn't it really? Because to give it recognizable buildings and layouts that a player character can interact with, you are inevitably going to lose the complete alienness of the Nerubians. The horror and mystery is watered down quite a lot when you realize that you have to have post offices and banks and inns and stuff like that. But at the same time, no matter how much of that stuff you put in, it's never going to feel as legit a city as a more recognizably humanoid one either. So in that sense, Blizz are stuck in a kind of a lose-lose for even trying to make this zone. But that's not to say that they aren't doing a really good job with what they've got. And there is that same really cool underground resistance style vibe as in some of the Suramar questing. And there are things I really like about this zone, like the bit where you rescue a group of Dalaran survivors, including Flynn Fairwind, Mira, and Katie Stampwhistle, and smuggle them all out in a fake prisoner convoy. And there are some stunning environments in here. I love the gigantic egg sacks hanging almost draped over the city, and the gigantic void tear above the palace, which will kill you if you try to fly too close. There's a really cool cavern accessed by tiny spider tunnels, where if you move around too much, huge worms detect your steps and come to eat you Dune style. The majority of these areas, like the Maddening Depths or the Silk Farms, are, like most of the other zones we've seen so far, pretty empty in terms of quests or mobs. And just like the other zones, the campaign story quests that take you through the zone are very short. Whether they will be added to before launch or whether there's just going to be lots of side quests, there is certainly the as yet unpopulated space for them in all these zones, or whether there will be absolutely nothing else, and this is it. I'm not sure. There is another half of all the campaign story quests that only unlock at max level, but even with that being said, there definitely appear to be some major story beats missing here, mostly involving a group you are probably surprised I haven't mentioned yet already. The Haranir. Those elfy, trolly, bat-formed safe bets for an allied race, and their appearance in this zone were probably the most anticipated part of this entire alpha build for much of the community, and we basically see none of them. At the very beginning, we meet Orwena and follow her out of the Breathing Pit. More on that in just a moment. And then she's gone, and there's no more Haranir apart from one random side quest giver on the other side of the map. There has to be way more of them in this zone when it's finished. Their main base, Wild Camp Orle, is there and beautiful but completely empty, and I really want to spend more time with them because lore-wise, they are so interesting. Lore bomb time, because we may not have had the explanation we were hoping for this build as to who the Haranir are and their history, but we got something almost as good. Wild Camp Orle is a luscious green area of the zone built amongst a tangle of huge growing roots. The area right next to the camp is called the Ruptured Lake. It seems to be what's left of a lake that clearly fell through the cave ceiling above when the roots burst through. The Haranir seem to be protecting those roots, and so the question is, what are the roots? Well, Do you remember a book that we found in the Emerald Dream in 10.2? The Legend of Elune'ahoir. It tells the legend of a world tree that was supposedly planted by Elune'ahoir, born of a branch of Gahanir, the mother world tree, that her, and I quote, great love Elune had given her. Aman'Thul did not approve of Elune'ahoir because it's clearly life magic and not order, and also because he's clearly a baddie in the World Soul Saga, and ripped it out, much like he had Yeshiraj before it. Dude just loves ripping out representatives of other parts of the cosmos that are growing in Azeroth. Weird. But just like Yeshiraj, the roots of Elune'ahoir went deeper than he thought. Though he had destroyed the tree, its winding roots still held firm beneath the soil, hidden from Aman'Thul's gaze. Below ground, the roots fed upon the tears of Elune'ahoir and grew strong. It is said that much later, as the world entered a new age, mysterious guardians arrived who dedicated their lives to protecting the roots. But that is a tale for another time. Well, fam, it looks like now is that time, because the Harinir are clearly the mysterious guardians mentioned in that book, which makes these roots the roots of Elune'ahoir, the forgotten world tree. Huge and worrying, because those roots are currently being corrupted in the breathing pit by what Orwena calls black blood, which doesn't sound good, does it? Sounds kind of voidy and bad, actually, doesn't it? The dungeons for the zone are Arakara, City of Echoes, that's its actual name, which is genuinely so reminiscent of the Azj-Kahet dungeons in Wrath, it's not even funny, but in a good, nostalgic way, rather than a tired, done before kind of way. I can't tell you anything about any of the bosses in this dungeon, because they all keeled over in seconds. These two dungeons were especially undertuned, I felt, but it is very beautiful if you like Nerubian stuff, which I do. And City of Threads continues the Suramar feel by being a bit like Court of Stars. There's a sequence at the beginning where you are following the trail of various spies around the city streets. A section where one of your spidery allies is leading you through a series of cordoned off barriers, and a final boss who is in the process of ascending two badass Nerubians to fight you, which is probably amazing, but which never actually started in any of the 3 runs that I did of this dungeon because it was bugged. That boss room also has this incredible lore bomb fresco on the wall, presumably dating back to the Black Empire and depicting faceless ones and Nerubians seemingly being ceremonially devoured by, who is that? N'Zoth? A new old god? Something else? All underneath the watchful gaze of, what is that? A Void Lord? Xal'atath? And why does it bear a striking resemblance to the celestial-looking thing on the Arathi map in Hallowfall? I love this shit. I live for cool frescoes we can speculate about. I'm gonna make like 20 videos about this picture by the time this expansion releases. You just see if I don't. We get some glimpses of endgame in this zone too. When I hit 80, Realm First by the way, an achievement that has been confirmed is actually an old Wrath achievement that pops up on the alpha. This is not a War Within thing, okay? Some dailies popped up, but I was also given the chance to choose from 3 main Nerubian allies, which one I wanted to progress rep with that week, with each awarding different abilities and boons and quests too. I went with the general because apparently it let me find hero memorials in the zone, which sounded cool and lore rich, but also because you get the cool carpet bomb ability, which is perfect for giving those bugs a sweet taste of democracy. There are locked events in each zone that require you to complete 3 world quests in that zone to access, and an Azeroth memory event, which costs 3 radiant shards to start, which I haven't got because I don't know how to get them, but which Moody has reported leads to a gameplay event, which is a reenactment of a famous scene from that zone's history, and which awards coffer keys that let you access special reward-rich versions of delves, which pop up periodically. All in all, I will say this zone doesn't have the awe and majesty of Hallowfall, but then what does? And it is a really interesting zone with a lot going on. I do think it's going to remind people a lot of Maldraxxus, and that's going to be good or bad depending on where you stand on Maldraxxus. Obviously, for me, it felt very familiar in that sense, but I did enjoy the story throughout the zone. I feel like the campaign reached a good climax here, and there is some seemingly great lore that I really want to know more about. Overall, I'm kind of undecided on Azj-Kahet or the Ringing Deeps as zones that I'm going to spend a lot of time in. They just feel so underground, which is a stupid complaint in the underground expansion, I know. I'm just hoping that the bright skies of Hallowfall and the open spaces of Dawn are enough to counter those enclosed fields. I know, I appreciate that is completely a personal thing, but I don't think I'll be alone in feeling this way. I guess now the question is, what comes next week? Well, Mists of Pandaria Remix, obviously, but in terms of the alpha, I think that this is probably the busiest 4-week period we'll get before launch. From now on, it's like dungeon updates and Mythic Plus and raid testing and new hero talents and world events and new delves to try out and beta and all the rest of it, and that's awesome, but this was the biggest and most regular content dump that we will get for the expansion, and from what we've seen so far, is this expansion good? Well, I don't know, obviously, but in my opinion, the signs are very good for two main reasons. One, the design philosophy is still in place from Dragonflight, but even more so. All that great letting the players play how they want and do what they want and no content being mandatory was the best vibe WoW has had in the modern era. And so far, War Within looks to be maintaining that and pushing the account-wide aspect of it even further with warbans. This is a very good thing. And as long as they don't fall into the BFA and Shadowlands trap with these new world events and delves and stuff by making the rewards things you need to get, because when you make the rewards mandatory, that's when a huge range and variety of content becomes a checklist rather than a smorgasbord. Keep the Dragonflight philosophy, all of this will be great. But then on top of that, this expansion has something Dragonflight didn't. A really intense, meaningful, and impactful story, clearly building, even in this small snapshot of quests, into something huge. It feels important. It feels high stakes. And if Blizz can pull both of those elements off, there is no reason why War Within can't be one of the all-time classic expansions. Plus, Xal'atath is in it, so I mean, it's already got an advantage over every other expansion, you know? But what do you think of the new Nerubian zone and the others that make up Khazalgar? Let us know in the comments below. And thanks for joining us today. If you like this video, don't thank us. Thank our patrons who give their actual real-life money to make all of our work happen. And guys, thank you, because without you, there would be a whole lot less Taliesin and Evitel. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. And remember, my name is Moody. No, my name is Taliesin from me and Evitel and Aniran and Penny too. Until next time, cheerio.